none of us could have predicted where I am today. So I couldn't have said 2 years ago that a year from now I'm going to be sitting as the CTO at Dentsply Sirona. It's just you just don't pick these things out, and instead what you do is you focus on the job that you're doing and you do it to the best of your ability. And what's happened for me then is more opportunities have presented themselves.
That was a clip from today's guest. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. It's always fun for me when I get to do an episode with someone that I know is a great business leader, someone I respect, I admire, and also someone that I've worked with for a long time, that I've known for a long time. So we have that like deeper personal relationship as well. Today's guest is someone that has done some very, very significant things in the business world and has done stuff that has really ultimately been about improving people's lives and continues to do that. Also, just like a cool, interesting story from a very, very interesting person. But before we get to it, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. My name is Aram Arslanian, and this is One Step Beyond. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey Ram, thanks for having me.
All right. So, for the uninitiated, for those who don't know, who are you and what do you do?
Kevin Boyle, Chief Technology Officer at Dentsply Sirona. People may not know Dentsply Sirona. It's a dental equipment and dental consumables manufacturer, and we also have a continence care business as well. So, company's been around for over 100 years, over 4 billion in revenue, and I'm fortunate enough to have joined just under a year ago, and I lead the R&D organization there.
Heck yeah. Okay. So, tell us, your role sounds like amazing. Tell us what that actually means to just the average layperson.
Yeah, it's a fun role. So it's very much focused on innovation, bringing new technologies to the market, solving problems for our customers, and improving care for our patients. And it's exciting because we really get to have a significant impact on outcomes and treatments. And what's particularly interesting about the dental space is we cover everything from when the patient sits in the chair all the way through to their final procedure and follow-ups, and you really get the full continuum of care oversight that you don't really get in some other medical spaces. And being able to have an impact in that space with a company like Dentsply Sirona, it's a fun role.
I think, like, even when you first told me about this role, and I think just for the average person, if they think of like technology and dentistry, like there's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But like, if I think about the dentist, I think of A, avoiding the dentist, and B, I just think about just getting my teeth drilled, being uncomfortable. Like, from a technology standpoint, what does that actually look like, and what are some of kind of like the bigger things that have been difference makers within the past few years?
I was surprised the more I got into it to understand the breadth of technologies that are involved, right? So it goes from everything that you would be traditionally familiar with from getting your teeth cleaned, but then there's also everything that goes on in the orthodontic space. So you'd be familiar with that, and then everything that goes with aligners within that space. So it's not just wires and brackets that you put in your teeth. And then there's other stuff, right? If you need a root canal, that's another kind of procedure. And if you need to get a crown, and if you need to get tooth implants, if you need dentures, so it ends up spanning quite a lot of different areas, and they're all different technologies that are used in those spaces. So they're all the things that would go in your mouth from that perspective. But then there's also all the imaging that goes with it. So there's everything from you get the X-ray, or you get an intraoral scan, or you get a CBCT image, and we sell all of those technologies and develop all of those technologies too. So then you're getting into complex electromechanical systems. And then what's most interesting and how the space is evolving is the entire ecosystem and bringing that into one software architecture. So if you think of something like an Apple iOS system where you have all your different technologies and they're all connected together on one iOS platform, we have a solution called DS Core that pulls all of these together. So from simplifying the workflow from a dentist perspective, that's key. And then there's also, if you think of it from an Amazon perspective, and you want to be able to order product and track where your orders are and pay the billing and all that side of things. So really, it ends up being quite a complex iOS Amazon like experience that we're looking to deliver as well. So it really, any technology you can think of, we end up playing in a lot of those different spaces.
So when people think about, again, just on average, the average layperson, myself included, if you think about technology, usually think about like you said, like Apple, like I'm thinking about my new iPhone or, like my computer or whatever. Um, but at the heart of this, and because so much of your career has really been based in like health technology, and we'll get into some like historical stuff as we go on. We talk about innovation because I know you love innovation, and that's something that's like really like turns on the lights for you. What's the difference, again, just to a layperson? Is it essentially the same thing when you think about innovation in the space of like consumable technology like iPhones versus health technology? Is it basically the same thing, or are there some things that are like clear differentiators?
I think the parallel to what I was describing makes sense, and it's not fully implemented, right? So it's not at the maturity level of an Apple or an Amazon ecosystem, and it's trying to bring it to that level. And again, if you think about your own personal experience when you go to the dentist and trying to understand what treatments you need, it can be a lot, right? And particularly if you've got something significant that needs to be addressed, and it could be a significant financial burden too. So really being able to provide very clear information on the diagnosis, very clear information on the treatment plan, how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost. It can be overwhelming amount of information to receive all at once, and being able to have a good way to communicate that. So we've got a tool called Communication Canvas that we can use, and we can really explain much more clear to patients exactly what the situation is and what the treatment plan is going to be, and just take the fear out of it.
I went through a period of my life where, again, anyone listening to the show would know my background as a therapist. I went through a period where I went to go seek some therapy, and it was like driving me crazy because I was like both in it and then also was like, huh, oh, I saw what you did there. Like I was like too in the like therapist mindset. Anyways, it's a later conversation. Um, so like, what gets someone, if someone's like, an engineer, like kind of into like, emerging technologies and innovation, all this stuff, what gets someone to go into kind of like the healthcare side of it versus getting into anything else that revolves around technology? Is it just like, hey, I knew I wanted to do this in school, or is it just kind of luck of the draw where you get hired?
I think for me, the reason I like healthcare so much is the outcome at the end, right? So you can apply those skills to any discipline, like you said, but it's really, what's the overall outcome you're going to have in the end? Are you making the world a better place, right? It might sound a bit kind of airy or whatever, but it's really, w- you want to do something that's really having a meaningful impact. And if you're going to apply your energy and your time and your intelligence to something, you'd like to know that you're actually doing something that's going to have a very positive impact. And that's what really drew me to healthcare and has kept me in healthcare for 25 years now, was really about the ability to have that impact and have that influence. And I really can't think of another industry that gives you that type of reward at the end of the day.
What was your path to it? So, how did you where'd you grow up? How did you first get interested in this space? And then kind of what was your like educational slash career path down this direction?
Yeah, so not as linear as maybe most people in the space. So I grew up in Ireland and went to university and did my master's there, and actually started out in software engineering and telecommunications with Ericsson. So I did that for about 5 years, and that was a great experience too. And then it was really, I was trying to stay in that software engineering side of things, and what happened was We moved to a different part of the country in Ireland. We were setting up family, and the part that we moved to didn't really have much software engineering. It was all med tech spaces. So I kind of fell into it in a fortuitous way, and started out with Medtronic and was working in their coronary division, working on drug-eluting stents, high pressure balloons, all for treating coronary artery disease. Started out as an associate R&D engineer there, and like from day one, fell in love with that industry and that space and the work that we were doing there. And over time, different opportunities presented themselves to me, and got an opportunity to move to California to their AAA business, aortic abdominal aneurysms, and worked in that space for 5 years. And then from there, got another opportunity that came my way to be VP of R&D at Becton Dickinson, which was originally CR Bard. They were acquired by BD after a few years, and I was in their peripheral intervention business there. Worked on peripheral arterial disease, end-stage kidney disease, oncology solutions, a lot of mechanical, electromechanical drug combination devices. So a lot of fun working with a lot of different technologies, solving big clinical problems and having a lot of impact there. And then post the acquisition of CR Bard by BD, I took on the interventional segment. So I had that original business unit of peripheral interventions, and then I got two more business units of urology and critical care and surgery. And that expanded my scope of different technologies in different spaces, getting into those areas with targeted temperature management, surgical solutions, urology solutions, endourology. So it was, again, a lot of fun, a lot of good teams that I got to work with, a lot of great minds and people got to work with, and ultimately, was in a position to be able to deliver a lot of impactful solutions that really had massive impact on patient lives.
So I want to go back when you said like from day one I fell in love with it. What did you fall in love with?
So the software side for me was interesting, and it was kind of intellectually a challenge and all of that. But maybe it was just the more mechanical engineering side of it. So my first day that I went into Medtronic, I was building a catheter in the R&D lab, and we were building prototypes, and it was the hands-on aspect of it. It was the material science piece of it. It was um, a much more integrated team because we were working towards one product, one solution to solve a specific customer need, and it was just a very focused and collaborative type of environment with, as I said previously, you're something that was really going to make an impact on people's lives. So I loved my time in Ericsson, but that was, base station controllers are massively complex software solutions, and we had subsets of that system, but you never really got to see the full breadth and scale of the solution. And there was teams all over the world working on it, and you were delivering your piece of code, but you never really got to feel the full impact of what you were delivering. So I think the med tech space, the solutions are somewhat more contained, and you can wrap your arms around it much much more easily, and the value proposition that you were bringing was much more defined, and you could see the end goal very clearly, and you could just drive towards that, and then ultimately you get out to see that product being used in patients, and you really see the impact firsthand, and that was me hooked after that.
You had said earlier, um, you're kind of like, hey, I want to make a change in the world. I want to make good things in the world. How that kind of sounds airy. And I mean, I know it can sound airy, but also knowing you as I do, I know that's like totally real. And wanting to create change in the world and being able to do practical and tangible things that actually like are like, oh no, here's this thing I built in the lab with all these people, and here's the change it makes. That's something that I think is doesn't sound airy. It sounds awesome and exciting and like a real difference maker. But where did you get that desire? Is that something you grew up with? So like your family that you grew up with, was that like kind of making an impact creating change in the world? Was that kind of just part of how you grew up, or is that something you found on your own for yourself?
Yeah, it wasn't how we grew up because, probably typical for a lot of people of my generation, most of my parents and etc. never went to college and didn't have that type of opportunity. They were more blue collar and worked hard, and we had a great upbringing and everything. But that I wasn't really exposed to those kind. They weren't really exposed to those kind of opportunities, so I didn't really get to see um, the way to be able to do that. And it was really once I got out in the world myself and I started getting into my own career, then the opportunity blossomed before me, and just grabbed it with two hands, and it was just something that resonated with me from a from a my own core values, and just wanting to do the right thing type of upbringing, and just resonated with me from there.
I'm lucky because I get to work with a lot of senior level leaders in tons of different industries, and I say most people like want to do good things in the world. They want to make a change, da, da, da. But of the great people I get to work with, the desire to actually make like a deep desire paired with a deep dislike of mediocrity are true trademarks of what I'd say is like kind of a Kevin Boyle. Like you really want to make an impact, and you really don't want to suffer mediocrity. So this is something. What are your thoughts on that before I go forward? I don't know if you would agree or disagree with that.
Yeah, you're always good at reading people, and I think you read me better than I read myself. So, um, yeah, I mean, you only get one shot at it, right? So you want to make the biggest impact you can have, and I guess that's how I approach pretty much everything in my life, right? I try and give it everything I've got, and if I can be successful, great, and if it doesn't work out, pick up and go again. So, and it's not all about me, right? So what I've very much learned over time is that I started out my career somewhat with that perspective, but also quickly came to realize that you can't do any of this on your own. It's always a team effort, and beyond that, it's how can you make the team as good as it can be, and how can you stimulate the people to share the goals and share the vision and share the energy, and share in the in the outcomes, and the satisfaction that comes with that. So particularly more and more as I get into this leadership, these leadership roles and have larger teams, it's all about what can I do to make those teams successful? What can I do to give people the opportunities that I got, and help them, have that impact? Because when you're leading, a large team over lots of geographies and lots of projects and lots of different cultures, it's really just about what can I do to remove the barriers for them and enable them to be successful, and then there's great joy in that, right? So when you see somebody make that transition, and reach their potential, and soaring in an organization, again, that's been probably the most rewarding aspect of my career over the last few years.
I want to get back into this piece about leadership. And I want to come back to like dealing with mediocrity and all of that. But I want to go back to that. Start with the idea of you only get one shot and you give it all you got, because there's another part of your story here that I think is adjacent and connects to all this is your background in sports. So whatever you're comfortable sharing with your background in sports.
I grew up in a competitive family, and I love that kind of upbringing. So I have three older brothers and an older sister, and all my brothers did rowing through high school and university. And in Ireland, that's not as an elevated status as maybe in other countries. It was just a sport that was offered in high school, and a lot of us got into that area. But even as a family unit growing up, my dad would instill a lot of competitiveness in us. You know, for example, at the end of dinner, we'd take out the cards, and whoever got the lowest card had to do all the dishes and do all the cleanup. And it was just for us, that was kind of fun and that was normal. And then whenever we had people over, we'd still take out the cards, and whoever got the lowest card would have to do the dishes. And somehow it was always a guest who was visiting ended up having to do the dishes. But so we kind of grew up with that constant kind of competitiveness in the family, and then from there, I followed my brothers into rowing as well, and had success at that, winning national titles and racing junior world championships and under 23s and representing my country as a senior athlete, and I just enjoyed the intensity of the competition, and in that you learn that you have to give everything, you have to be fully committed, if you want to get the outcomes that you're looking for, and you need that same mindset pretty much in every aspect of life, right? So it- with work, with family, you have to be all in with it, and give it your full effort to make all of those things work and be functional. And I'm still rowing. So I just got back from the Masters World Championships. I was there with my brother, and we were racing it together in a pair. And it's a great way to stay connected, and it's a fun event to go do. And we just missed out on a gold medal by 0.3 of a second, which stings, but we'll be back next year. We know what we need to work on, and for us, that's that type of pushing yourself to your limit on a continuous basis just feels like living.
Yeah. Um, so around being competitive, because again, I know you're a highly competitive person, but competition and being competitive, like culturally within, well, I'll say North America because that's where we are right now, but it can be viewed as like a good thing, like, oh, like we're competitors here, but it can also be viewed as like a toxic, like, oh, that's crappy when people are competitive. So again, like, I'm not asking you to like go to some big profound level, but if you were to think about like what's really the difference between like a toxic competitive culture versus a like healthy and progressive competitive culture, what would be some of the indicators there?
Yeah, so it's something I've had to give quite a bit of thought to, because again, I'm that type A personality, and I am hyper competitive, and that doesn't fit well with everybody, right? So if you come in with that approach on top of everybody, it's going to lead to a toxic culture. So I don't mind sharing who I am, and I can respect who other people are, and I can meet people where they're at, and there's all different people, and we have to work together. So the key for me is that our team needs to be competitive against our competitors externally. So we need to work as a team. We need to work together, and it's about trying to build the sense of team. And you can have different types of people. You can have different types of personalities, and it's really about blending the best of each of those things together to get the team to perform at a high level. So it's not about individual competitiveness, but it's more about, hey, let's be aware of who our competitors are out there. What do we need to do to win against our competitors? But I've almost kind of pivoted away from that a little bit too, because I look at it more as, what do our customers need? What do our patients need? And what do we need to do to deliver that as quick as possible ahead of our competitors? So it's almost a, let's leapfrog here. How do we leapfrog? We leapfrog through innovation. We leapfrog through having good rigor and process around that, building a culture around that. For me, what I've also found is that in every organization I've been in, the people are smart, right? It's
Mhm.
not it's not a lack of smart people. It's not a lack of capable people. It ends up being culture that you want to build, and a sense of common vision and purpose, and a sense of continuous improvement, because nothing's ever perfect. There's always room to be better. And if people accept that and don't think of it as a knock, but as a way to set a benchmark, and we can strive forward and improve from there, and you bring people into the fold, and you empower them to make decisions, all of those things then lead to the right kind of outcomes that you're ultimately trying to get to.
So, in your own growth as a professional and then into a leader, what's something on your competitive side that you've had to manage? And so it's like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you could recognize I'm competitive. I kind of have to manage this part of my personality so it works well within this group.
I mean, early on, so again, I was hard driven, and I was trying to do it all myself, right? So I think that's where I was early on. And that'll work for a while when you're in more of an individual contributor type mode. And then as you progress, you can get away with that a little bit as well, because you can compensate for where you see gaps and all of that. And I think what was the change for me was to realize I have one way of doing things, but it's not the only way. And there's a lot of right ways to get the job done. And letting go to let people do it their way, um, and then seeing that work helped me learn, okay, that's another way of doing things. That's also an effective way of doing things. And in some cases that's a better way of doing things. And then how do you take that learning and add it to my own learning and make everything better? And how do you share that then with more people? And how do you bring that sense together? So um I think the more I have been willing to step back and let people come forward with their ideas, the more successful outcomes have been overall.
All right, so let's go into getting into leadership. So, you start as most people start, like you kind of start as an individual contributor. Was getting into leadership roles something you sought out, or was it something that just kind of naturally came?
It's probably a bit of both. And Medtronic does a nice job of creating career leader paths, and you can go down an individual contributor path, you can go down a project management path, you can go down a more managerial path or a core team leader path. So they have different options that are available to you, and you're encouraged to, hey, which path do you want to go down? And for a period of time, everybody's kind of the same because you got to advance at least some technical capabilities, etc. And then you get to a fork in the road, and it's which way you're going to go. And for me, I took the project management path because I love doing projects, right? I liked the finite element to it. I liked the specificity of here's the problem that we're trying to solve, and I liked the you build a team, and then the team comes together and you work through it, and you drive it to the end. And I wasn't really looking to have people reporting directly to me. I was more looking for building that team. And similarly in rowing, it was always a team effort, right? So I was in a boat with other people. You can't do it all on your own. It was all about having the right team around you, and everybody coming together and working together. So that's what most appealed to me. And then as that got bigger and bigger, and then I got more and more projects, then you kind of shift more towards the functional side because you can't lead all the projects yourself, right? So then it ended up shifting and morphing into that. And then, I never really planned out my career. Like I couldn't have told you, and we've talked about it, right? We've had a long relationship here. None of us could have predicted where I am today. So I couldn't have said 2 years ago that a year from now I'm going to be sitting as the CTO at Dentsply Sirona. It's just you just don't pick these things out, and instead what you do is you focus on the job that you're doing and you do it to the best of your ability. And what's happened for me then is more opportunities have presented themselves, and then you have a decision to make: is that the path you want to go down, or do you want to stay where you're at, or do you want to go in a different direction? And I've enjoyed each leadership challenge as it's come. And then you kind of look, well, what would be the next step as opposed to the next 5 steps? I've never found tremendous value for me to say in 5 years, in 10 years, this is where I want to be. I've been more flexible to the opportunities that have come my way.
How much of that flexibility do you think is based on your willingness to take a leap? Because you are certainly willing to take leaps of faith with no promise of a soft landing. So, how much is that connected to that?
Um, Heavily. So, well, yeah, they're all kind of leaps, I guess, when I start thinking about it. So I left a good job. I was in Dublin. I was working with Ericsson. We had a good job. And my wife had a good job there, and we left and we moved to the other side of the country with no promise of any job. So you do take a leap. And when we left Ireland and came to the US, I was going to a job, but I was going to a different culture. I was going to a different business unit. I didn't know any of the people. And my wife had no job lined up. So and we had 2 kids at that stage. So you're moving from one country all the way to California, and you just kind of land there, and you're somewhat thrown in the deep end, right? There's people have an expectation, and you kind of have to go figure it out. And So you have to take a leap and you have to have some courage for it, but also have some confidence that what got you to that point is based on merit, and that, they wouldn't have given the opportunity if they didn't believe as well. And then you have to grab it with both hands and figure out how to make it work as well. So, there's a bit of 50-50 in it. And fortunately for me, those leaps have worked out so far.
Well, if you take your experience and would extrapolate it to like a younger professional, because like a lot of people talk in generalities about risk taking, and like I get it. Like it's like, when someone asks you about like risk taking, it's like, oh, no, no, like it's hard to talk about. But really, if you think about your career, because your career has been, you really didn't map it out. You just did the next right thing and made the next right decision. And like, I really, like you said, just like you just take a hold of something and you figure it out. So if you were to extrapolate from your experience and a young professional who would be listening to this, like what's just kind of like a few key takeaways you could say about risk taking and how to jump into it, like how to just take that first leap?
I'm not sure I'm not sure how much conscious thought I gave to risk taking. It was more, as each opportunity presented itself. It was, and it wasn't like total belief I could do it. It was more, it was almost like there was no other choice. So, to some extent, and it was, when we made the change going from Ireland to the US, it was a it was an now or never moment, right? So if I didn't take that chance, I'd still be in Ireland, and everything was going fine there. There was no reason to leave per se, but at the same time, it was, what's the maximum impact you're going to have? So if you don't take a chance, you're never going to know. And to me, it didn't feel like an option, like a choice. It was, this is, if I'm going to do what I want to do with my life, then yeah, it's a risk, but it's not a choice either. So I think that's how I approached it. It was like it's the now or never moment, and then you just have to be determined then to figure out how to make it work after that. And I've always had confidence that if I went at something with enough effort, with the right mental mindset, that I'd be able to make it work.
I love what you just said. That was never a choice. I'm going to quote an old hardcore band called Breakthrough. It's like one of my favorite demos. It was never a choice. I always like that idea. It's like, and one of the themes that I hear a lot with people who are big impact makers is like always there's always a ton of risk taking involved. But the way they describe what risk is like, I wasn't really calculating it. It's just like it was just like an hour never. This is not a choice. I'm doing this thing. And of course, there's also like the parts, and speak to this as much as you want. Like sometimes when you take a leap, it's not always this like romantic ending. It's like, oh, and it was such a perfect thing. It's like, people like fall face down multiple times, myself included. I have like smashed into the ground, but it was never ever a choice for me. And I, I I never chose to be in a position where I'm constantly testing myself. It's just the way my mind works. And it's been at moments like anxiety inducing, but overall it's been like hugely, it's made my life a huge adventure, which I don't know how it could be any other way.
Yeah, that's same for me. That's yeah, there's definitely anxiety. Not everything goes smooth, right? But nothing goes smooth anyway, right? There's always stuff going on, right? That you're always trying to figure out and address. And I think once you commit to it and you commit all in and you approach it in the right way, with the right moral and ethical approach, and you stay fast to that, then for me, it's worked out after that.
So let's go a little bit into the space of developing people, because you have historically built really great teams underneath you, and those teams have built like great professionals in there. Um, I've noticed that a lot of people who have um, been involved in sports at a high level, like at a significant level. So they have like a really tight connection to having a coach and a team. They tend to be leaders who are really, really good at building great teams and great leaders. Uh, any thoughts on that, like that connection to the high level of sport you played, and then how you built teams?
I think the way I look at it from a work perspective, I don't know how well it relates to sport, but the way I've always looked at it, and it kind of puts you in a precarious position to some extent, is I'm trying to coach people up to take my job.
Mm,
Um, and and I want them to be successful at it. So I'm not sure you really do that in sport per se,
mm,
because you don't see that same behavior, I think, to the same extent. Um, but that mindset has served me well, and I think it's just the right thing to do for people. So you know, giving people the opportunities, exposing them as much as possible to what you see, and stretching them to take on those types of assignments that will put them in a position to be recognized by the organization for the strong work they do. If you started at the top, it filters down through the rest of the organization, and you set that expectation, and I think you end up with the right types of mindsets and the right types of behaviors that again lead to the ultimate winning that you're trying to achieve. So that's really how I've approached it. I'm not sure I took a whole lot out of sport. Again, when I was in sport, I was very much at a highly competitive level. I was very much the type A personality, um, and I was trying to outwork everybody, and I had a different kind of mindset to it. Whereas as I've become more into this leadership role, it's not about me anymore. It's about what can I do for everybody else, and I didn't have that mindset when I was competing. So I think I've morphed quite a bit in my thinking, from a leadership perspective, and how I think about that.
So how have you managed like one of the things you'd said earlier on was like, hey, you just like gotta you only go around once, you gotta put your effort into everything. But that's not the way everybody looks at work. Like so some people are just like, hey, listen, I work here, but it's like you're not like my team isn't my family. Some, corporation owns this. It's like there's some product here. I'm just here to like basically do a good enough job. So you mentioned earlier, it's like teams are made up of all different kinds of people, like different cultures, different personalities. But there's also different work styles where some people are literally just there to do a pretty good job. How do you manage that from like a team building? Because again, it's like you've built some really good teams underneath you. So what's your approach on that one?
You have to meet people where they're at, is the first thing. And I get it. There's people want that balance, and I think it comes back to my personality is I want to be as impactful as I can, and as I said, not everybody has the same mentality, and that doesn't mean that they don't add value. So again, you want to meet people where they're at, and then you want to try and inspire them. So yeah, it may not be to the same intensity and extent as what I do, and that's okay. But if you can inspire people and you can set a vision for people, you can bring people along that journey. And if you can find the things, like, people put a lot of time and effort into their work. They spend a lot of time in that office, and they're going to put in a lot of hours. So for me, I want to make it enjoyable for them. I want them to want to come to work, and when they come to work, I want them to want to work. For me, it's about creating the environment to allow that to flourish. And really, that's all you can do, right? So yeah, you got to manage your low performers, and you got to manage people who are disruptive to the organization. But beyond that, I think what I found is people want to do stuff that's going to have an impact. People don't want to come to work and do a bad job. People don't want to come to work with a bad attitude and don't want to get, you know, I haven't really found that to be the case. I found it more that if you can create that good team environment, create that good innovation culture, create that vision of where you're trying to get to, people become more and more engaged, even than they may have originally thought or desired they wanted to be. And if you can set a good example, I think by and large most people respond well to that, and then you end up with a pretty good outcome in the end.
Yeah, listen, man, I totally agree with you. Like, whenever there's like a new generation, it's like, oh, Gen Z, like millennials, like, people like have this like whole big reaction to it. It's like, I don't know, man. Like if you're just a good leader and you build a good culture and you're really connected to like, I like what you started with, meet people where they're at and be like, hey, this is the thing we're doing and I want you on board. How do we get there? I think that's rather than having this whole like song and dance about how each generation is this like ultra complex problem that we can't possibly solve. Like people at their core want to do something meaningful. And whether it's creating medical devices or like working in a paper bag factory, meeting people where they're at and inspiring them to bring their best into each day by helping them feel like, hey, like let's do this thing together. And whether that's great, like create a great team culture, or whether it's like hit a sales target, or is it to innovate, whatever it is, I don't think there's an industry out there that you can't have some level of direct impact and inspiring people.
And that's a lot of my job right now is trying to help people see the vision and trying to help people get excited by it. And in my world, when we do new product launches and people can see the impact, then and you celebrate that and you recognize that, and then you start backing it up with, hey, here's the next wave of innovations. You could be part of that type of a story with this product and get people working on it. It becomes a cycle, right? And then it just gets faster and faster, and the energy builds from there. So yeah, that's fully agree with you, and that's been my experience. Is the better you can set up the culture, the better you can define the vision. A lot of the those types of things that you hear about with problems with different generations or different this and that and people being disengaged, I think a lot of it disappears.
I just think it's corny, man. Like, in every industry, there's trends and everything. In the industry I'm in, it's always like, how do we manage this next generation who are they're so different than everyone else? It's like I don't know. Like human beings are different from person to person, generation to generation, but there's this like hard through lines of like complete similarities. And like there's a way that I think you can't go wrong if you look at it from like a hierarchy of needs perspective. Um, four things matter to people in the work world. Four hard things. The first number one thing is their relationship with their boss. And I don't mean they like their boss. Their boss is their buddy. It's just, does their boss help them grow, stretch, inspire them, help them like change their scope of the world? Is their boss invested in them? And I don't even mean monetarily, like they get them training or something. That their boss is invested in helping them grow and develop as an individual. Like you'd said earlier, like like do they get the spotlight? Do they do these things? If someone has a great boss, you could lead them through it almost doesn't matter what kind of the industry it is. That's the number one indicator. Number two is their connection to their team. And again, it's not that they're buddies with their teams and they go out and have drinks. It's whether or not the team they're on enables them to do the best work they've ever done. Do you have strong peer-to-peer connections? Do you have strong peer-to-peer coaching? Do people challenge each other effectively? Are you like I like the rowing example? Like, are we all pulling together here? Is it us trying to compete with maybe not even another business, but try and get our product to the consumer faster in a better way? Like, does your work or your team help you do the best work you've ever done? Third thing is whether or not they actually like their job. And people always kind of like laugh when I say that one. Like, how can that be so low down there? Well, because not every job on surface level seems as cool as every other job. And some of them might be and might not be. But what you do, Matt, like the actual fabric of your job, like what your tasks are in a day, people care, but they don't care as much as the first two. And the last thing that is the indicator of whether or not people are like give all in their role is how much they get paid, their benefits, their work life balance. And it's funny that that's the one that people like always think is first, like how much do I get paid? I know people who work for an amazing boss, have a great team, and maybe don't particularly love every part of their job and actually probably don't get paid that well, who have a lot of satisfaction with what they do. It's because they're like in the mix with doing something with people who are great. And you get that right combination for people. And very few people have the perfect job where all four of those things light up. But if you get three of them or even two solid ones, it's a difference maker.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Before we go into innovation, which is something that I got to hit on with you, something that you know well. is the more senior level you get, it kind of taps out at a point where you have less direct control over things and you have to manage more from like an influence space. And also, the more senior level you get, you have to deal with a lot more mediocrity. So, like when you're at like a more junior level, it's like kind of just like point and shoot. You're like, going back to like you're in the lab with the catheter and doing that. But the more senior level you get, you've got like higher level politics, people have conflicting agendas, there's less direct ability to make something happen. And of course, the more senior level you get, you start becoming like management in the mind of the people. It's like them, the corporate people or the C suite or this or that. So, what's that been like for you in your journey? Because again, you're just someone who doesn't suffer mediocrity. So, how have you managed that? Have you gotten more senior?
I know I'm not, but I still feel like I'm still a project manager in a lot of ways, right? So I still want to, for me, again, a lot of it is about trying to remove the roadblocks. I mean, that a lot of what the challenge people have, right? Can they do their job effectively? Is there's roadblocks in their way, and trying to remove the roadblocks is the most important piece of it. Um, and then, as you said, a lot of it is an influencing role. So I have the R&D functional responsibility, but R&D on its own can't do a project. A project is a cross-functional effort, and it takes invariably nearly every function in the company is involved at some point or other. And R&D generally has the responsibility for project execution. So then you end up having to do quite a bit of influence, and the only way it works in an effective way is through effective communication, right? So trying to come down heavy from the top, right, just destroys an organization, right? So it's really taking that little bit of extra time to explain the why, to explain the rationale, and then ask them for the answer. So you know, I don't have all the answers. I'm never going to have the answers now, right? Because now you're at such a senior level, you're so far removed from the detail, and the details are so spread out cross-functionally that you can be aware of the problem, you can describe the problem, you can describe the end state, but the mechanics of how to really fix it now, you have to know where your role ends and what you can do, and then it becomes an influencing type conversation, and it's an engagement conversation. What can we do to make this work? Because we're all trying to get to the same endpoint, and help us find the answer. And I think when you take it that way, then you get a much better response as opposed to this has to get done. Here's the endpoint. You know, and coming down in a dictatorial fashion, just it doesn't work. And the tendency is because there's so many issues to solve, there's so many deadlines to be met that people will shortchange that effort, um, or be curt, right, or be more direct than is necessary, right? But you can be directive without being dictatorial, right? So it's trying to be clear on where you're trying to get to, but engage the organization in getting there, and then do what you can to remove the hurdles that are there. And the politics, I find, don't come from a bad place, right? They come from competing priorities. So it's not that somebody it's I don't find so much political games. I just find that there's competing resources and everyone's trying to get to the same endpoint, and it's like, well, how do we solve it, right? We all want to get to the same point here. What's the right way to solve it? And again, just going in with an open mind and an open perspective and see it from the other side. And I think the more you look at it from the other side, the better perspective you always get. So you do have to lift yourself out of one seat and put yourself in the other seat, and take a different perspective on it. And then, once you're in there, you can usually find your way through it as well. So, and then when people don't like the answers, you got to provide the context, right? So it doesn't always work out. There's invariably, I don't want to say loser, but it doesn't. There's competing priorities, and you have to go in a particular direction. And I think being clear on the outcome and why the outcome was decided, and closing the loop on that part. Again, people may not like it, but if they understand it, they can tolerate it, right? And understand the perspective and understand how the company's working. So
I like what you said about politics there, where like they typically don't come from a bad place. And like, one of the things I hear about politics a lot where, people are like, oh, politics are so crappy. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, you ever done a road trip with your friends? Like, like a multi-day road trip? Like you're entering into politics. You ever have a neighbor who you have to figure out like recycling with? Like, you forget about it. Human beings by nature, it's like the idea of like politics, it's like there's the cartoonish thought that does exist where people are just like kind of these like nasty people who are out for themselves. That does exist in like smaller spaces, but human beings trying to figure anything out is going to inevitably have things to do with like how do people get things done? What are power dynamics? One of the biggest learning things for me was like try going on tour with your band for 2 months, like, and being in the same van with like five other people. Forget about it. It's like total like politics and power dynamics and like why do we go to this restaurant to eat? Why did we stay at that person's house? Like, and the more that I think of people can just be like, hey, typically no one's coming from an initial bad place, but we're not always getting to good solutions, and that has a lot to do with like weird power dynamics and how we like problem solve together. Whenever someone says to me, it's like I'm not political, I like in the workspace, I always kind of chuckle because even just saying that is a very political thing because you're trying to position yourself in a certain way. Instead, I'd just be like, hey, people are trying to come, everyone's trying to figure it out together. It's going to get political. And if we don't get like aggressive or defensive, but just be like, how do we get to the best solution and stick to it and recognize this is part of it? That's the fray. That's the competition. And it should be the best idea is going to come out of it, but it just takes people being dedicated and not throwing up their hands.
the downside, right, is it takes time, right? So then, teams want to move fast and then this happens, right? And then it ends up being conversations, right? And then it feels like it's slow. And I think that's it. That's true in every organization I've seen. Um, and for me now, I'm trying to, how do I make that better? How do I make that faster? What can I do different to try to cut through this in a quicker way? So I think that's been one of the things that I've been trying to wrap my head around.
Heck yeah. All right, man, let's go into one of I can't wait to talk to you about this. So I, something that I always chuckle at is when people say that use the word strategy, or if they use like empathy, it's like, it's just like, I just want to be strategic. And I'm like, okay, so what does strategy mean to you? Or like empathy, it's like, all right, what does empathy actually mean? There are these words that people use that are like good business words or good leadership words that kind of make people feel good when they use them. But then you ask a few questions and you're going to realize, do they actually know what they're talking about versus do they not know what they're talking about? So innovation to the common person, innovation sounds like, oh, I want to be innovative. But what does, from your perspective, innovation actually mean within the realm that you operate in?
Yeah. So for me, innovation is how I try to build a culture within all of my teams, and it's it's really about getting out to the customers, understanding what their problems are, spending time with them, get intimate with it through observational research, through questioning, through going to conferences, reading literature. That's where it all starts. And what you get out of that then is you start to understand it from the customer perspective, what their challenges are, what their problems are. And then you got to focus on what is that unmet need and how can we solve that unmet need. And it takes a bit of a grind at the start to get people understanding how to do this process well. But what happens as a result of it is you end up with this really exciting project that the team is going to get to work on. And right from the get-go, the team knows it's an exciting project and the impact that has on the culture, because once you have an R&D team working on it and then they bring it into a full project team, now you've got all the cross-functional groups working on this exciting project. And then when you commercialize that project, now you've got the entire marketing and commercial organization getting the opportunity to sell that product and the impact it has on customers and on patients, and they get excited about the product, and then they're like, well, what's the next one coming? So if you can get that innovation engine up and running and you get people engaged in that process up front, it just generates this wave of exciting ideas that you get to work on, which turns into exciting projects, which stimulates the entire organization all the way through to sales. And then you start building that credibility within the organization with the customers. And then everybody's waiting, like, what's coming out next? What's the next thing you guys are going to bring? And you start feeling like you're really having that impact. You're really changing how that market is developing, and for us, how the practice of dentistry is going to develop. And to be able to see that coming to fruition here, we just had our DS World event last week, and we had some big product launches, our Prime Scan 2 and XSmart Pro Plus, and the reaction from the people at the conference from DS, they were, excited by it, and the energy in the place was just incredible. And everybody that's coming back from there is sharing all that energy with the teams. And now we're getting the innovation with the next wave of stuff coming. So for me, innovation is the most fun activity you can do because it stimulates the entire organization. And then the ultimate impact at the end of all of that is you grow the organization. You start having that top line impact, and then everybody gets to benefit from the impacts of that as well. So um, it's really the way to grow a company, and to get energized and get bought into the vision and the strategy. And it all starts with getting that upfront work done right from the innovation perspective.
Yeah. I I know how much you love it just based on our relationship and talking about it, but also like when you talk about it, like your all like how you talk, your physical presence, it's just like boom, you light up hard. Um, let's break it down even
Yeah.
like to the most basic level, just for the audience. What is innovation? Like how would you describe it in the most basic terms in terms of like health technology?
It's solving a problem better than it's ever been solved before. So basically, it's something that's new to world, that addresses an unmet need, that addresses a problem in the market that nobody else has been able to solve. And they may not have been able to solve it because they didn't define it correctly. They solved it in a different way, but it's coming with something that's brand new, that's never existed before, and it's meeting a need in a way that's better than it's ever been met before. And if you do that, then that's where the success comes from. And it's success for everyone. It's success for everyone in the company. It's success for the dentist. It's success for the patient. And it's a win-win-win all the way around when you do it right.
Is there a piece of technology that you could point to that would be like for like lay people, like that would be like, here's like for your average technology person or for for the average user of normal people technology, here's an example of what something would be a very innovative product.
So within dentistry, you might be familiar. Do you ever get a dental impression where they put that kind of
Yeah.
thing in your mouth and
Yeah.
you bite down on it? And that's been around forever, and still over half the dental practices that you would go to would still have you do a dental impression. So there's a new technology space, an intraoral scanner that's been out for a while. It's like a wand, and you can put it in your mouth, and you can scan the inside of the mouth, and it gives you gives you what the dental impression would give. And the product we just launched, the Prime Scan 2, the way these products work is they're basically in office based. So you would take the scan, it goes to the laptop, and then if you need to do treatment planning or diagnosis planning, you can do it, within on premise on that laptop.
That sounds insane, man. Like that's like the craziest.
Yeah,
'Cause I have such clear memories of, like, biting down on those things to make impressions. That's
yeah.
nuts. Alright, so innovation. I know you love it. I know it's, like, part of what gets you up in the morning. It's exciting. It also sounds like it could go awry, like, pretty easily. So, like, what's the connection between discipline and innovation?
Yeah. So I always think of it kind of like a delicate flower almost, right? Because it nobody has time, right? So everybody's so busy. There's always so much going on that it's hard to make time for innovation. And I found that. in multiple times that I've deployed this is people don't feel like they have time to do it. And as soon as you stop making time to do it, your pipeline dries up, and then people are just doing minor iterations to current projects. So they still fill up their time doing project work, but now it's not the exciting, impactful, high value projects because the front end innovation work hasn't been carried out. So you have to make space, and you have to force it to some extent and say, one day a month, we're going to have our innovation council meeting, and we need everybody coming in with their ideas. And here's the process for that you need to follow, and we'll give the training, etc. But you create the space in the organization, and you ensure that the leadership attend the meeting. So if people know the leadership are prioritizing it and are going to be there, then they're going to put some effort into it. And you don't need everybody in the organization innovating, but you need the people who have that type of tendency and that desire and that interest to be given space to come forward in a safe way with their ideas, because not every idea is going to be a good idea, but you want them to feel comfortable that they can bring the idea forward, and that it's being brought forward in a way that's got structure and organization to it so you can evaluate it. Because sometimes what you'll find is people have ideas, but the idea is something that's been around for a long time, but nobody's ever killed it and nobody's ever moved it forward, and it kind of sits in people's brains, and either you kill it or you move it forward. And making the decision frees up the mental capacity to go to the next innovation piece. So a lot of it is about, and the reason I say it's like a flower is because if people come in with the idea and you like shoot it down hard, right? Nobody else is going to come with ideas. They don't want to be in that environment. If you don't get the senior leadership to consistently attend, then people are like, well, they don't care about it, so why should I care about it? I've got other things to do. So then it dies. If you don't have good training around the process and reinforce the training on a regular basis, people don't know how to do it. So then you don't get the good ideas coming through in the right way, and people aren't evaluating them. It dies again. So there's a lot of ways for this thing to die. And if you don't constantly nourish and flourish with it, it'll die also. So it has to be a very dedicated effort, sustained effort, because it doesn't start off super strong, but it gets stronger and stronger the more time and energy you put into it and the more dedication you give to it.
That's good. That was a very, very, very good description. Okay, man. So as we're heading towards the end of the interview, I'm going to take you into what we call the crucial three, which is three questions that scale up in difficulty as we go. But before we do that, anything you want to shout out, anything you want to mention, any questions you want to ask me, anything at all?
No, I think you've been pretty thorough going through my career, my life, and my perspective. So I'm good.
Okay. All right. So starting with the crucial three. So remember, they're going to start getting harder and harder and harder as we go up. Question number one: what is one thing now that you've gotten into this role? And like you said, like 2 years ago, you couldn't have guessed that you were going to be in this role. Now you're in this role. Super interesting company, real big challenge. What's one thing that you recognized worked well for you in your last role that you recognize now that you have to switch to match the challenge of this role?
And if that's the easy question, then I'm in trouble with the next three, the next two. So I think the big change is really the stakeholders that I'm working with. So in my previous role, I was in much more of a technical role, and now I've got a lot more different stakeholders, from the the board of directors to the peers on the management committee, and it's really taking the time to explain, the current state and the desired future state and how we get there and what needs to happen. And like we talked about earlier, it's not so much the politics, but it's the sharing of information in an effective way and communicating in an effective way with different types of stakeholders in order to get to the outcome that you're trying to get to.
Mm. Okay. What is one time, it could be personal or professional, what's one time where you took a leap and you fell hard on your face? and you can give whatever level of detail you want. What's one time where you totally ate it? And what's the thing that you learned from that that helped you continue to be successful?
So I think the biggest challenge I had is wanting to please everybody and wanting to deliver the projects on time. And then, you push so hard that you kind of leave. So it was early on in my career, but it was pushing too hard on people in order to try and deliver an outcome and not doing it the right way. And it was kind of that transition period I was talking about, going from that type A and trying to do it all myself. And then as I was transitioning, I was still type A, and I was trying to get everyone else to be type A to drive in that direction, and it didn't work. I didn't have it wasn't the right management style to get the right level of engagement. And it's you got to learn from it, right? So then how do you adapt your style to make it work for other people? And then it's the learning from that. And you're going to have things that don't work, and you're going to have things that you don't do right. And it's really about being able to have the humility to admit you did it wrong, and then have the courage to make a change and try and do something better moving forward. So if you don't have the self-awareness and the humility to accept that you're doing stuff wrong and that you have to change, then I think you're going to be in trouble. So for me, it's always been about trying to learn every step along the way. But probably the biggest fail I feel like I had was that early on in my career, as I was really trying to make that transition from being an individual contributor into being more of a leader, was trying to modulate my style in order to be effective.
Hmm. All right. Something that I know about you is you have no problem like giving a spotlight to other people and talking about where other people are great. Like you will super clearly point out lots of positive things about other people, and also, in I think in a healthy way, in like a appropriate way, you can also point out gaps in teams or how people are approaching a problem. But something that I have found you're not as comfortable with. If I ever said like, "Hey man, toot your own horn and tell me something great that you did," you get like real uncomfortable about it. And I like that humbleness, but so much of our conversation has been about making an impact and like, creating a change. And again, I, it's a very kind of like you approach to say like, I want to make a difference, but also because you are actually a very humble person, you're like, oh, but I don't want to sound like corny about it in areas I do it. So I am going to ask you to toot your own horn. And that's why it's the last question, because I know it's one of the hardest things for you to do. What is one thing that you've been involved in, or one piece of feedback that you have gotten from, it could be from a report, or it could be from like an end user of a technology. What's one piece of feedback, or one clearly identifiable thing where you could say, I made a huge impact here?
Yeah, you were right. The questions get tougher. um,
I knew from the first, as soon as you said, I don't want to sound like all up in the air about making a change, I knew I was going to hit you with this.
um, my the role I had in peripheral intervention in BD, where I took on the VP of R&D role, that was a tough role to walk into for me. So I was coming from a director level in Medtronic, and I moved into the VP of R&D role, and there was some politics that were involved about the person that was supposed to be in the role, and how it all had transitioned. And they'd been without a leader for a number of months, and then there had been a culture challenge there as well, where it wasn't quite where it needed to be. And going in there, there was great people again, but the culture was just not where it needed to be, and some of the leadership were more than challenging to work with. And when I look back, you know, when I by the time I left that group and even today, I'm still close with the number of people there. It's such a high performing business and the team are so high performing. And it's a team effort, right? And it's not just the R&D function. There was a lot of people involved in the leadership team. But when I look at the quality of work from the R&D team and how high performing that R&D team is, I like to think I had some say in it, and I like to think that I left it better than I found it, and that you know we talked about earlier. You want to be able to promote people to a point where you do yourself out of a job, and I think that was accomplished there. When I look at the R&D leader there, they're phenomenal at what they do, and it was credit to that person and their growth, but also I feel good that I was able to be part of that journey as well. And then the team under them is fantastic as well. So and the team under them is fantastic. So it's just been really good to see how strong that team performed, how much they developed, and then ultimately the staying power after I left, that it continued to develop, continued to get better. That's really rewarding to see that team and how good they perform.
Heck yeah, man. I appreciate it. I know that wasn't easy. And as someone who's been able to walk a small part of that journey with you, like totally legit, what a great team, great people involved, and comes from great leadership. All right, man. So that's it. We've come to the end. Anything you want to share as we're closing off? Anything you want to put out there? And of course, we'll put all the company info in the episode bio. But anything else that you want to put out there?
No, I mean, the only thing I'll say is that I wouldn't be where I am today either without your support, right? So you and your team, as we went through that journey with the last example I gave, we wouldn't, none of that would have happened either without you and your involvement and your team's involvement. I know for me personally, in terms of my style and my communication style, and my leadership style, and the way you've been able to give me feedback over time has been very practical and very applied. And I really appreciate the style of coaching that you guys provide, and it's really been transformational for me in my career. So thank you for that.
Heck yeah, man. I appreciate it. And working with you has always been such an honor. And to be able to walk with someone who is making that level of impact. All right, everyone. This is also like a great, fun conversation. It's just a little personal because Kevin and I have known each other for so long. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. Just even like, I don't know, man. You're into a cool new thing now. I'm super excited for you. So with that, everyone, we will see you next time. My name is Aram Arslanian, and this is One Step Beyond.